We love Zencaster because it allows us to record the audio for our podcast and create the video segments we use for our weekly Sister Scoop episodes. Zencaster has helped us make content capture simple.
It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencaster. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests, and feel a sense of zen knowing Zencaster's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable.
If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencaster's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast in one place and distribute it to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations.
Just go to zencastr.com/pricing and use our code SistersAssembled, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all of our podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.
Katie and I are always hungry, and one snack we both love is beef jerky. That's why we're so excited to tell you about one of our favorite jerky brands, Matt Hat Jerky.
Matt Hat's delicious taste makes it a great snack, and the variety of flavors, including original, black truffle, and my personal favorite, roasted garlic, means there's a flavor for everyone. Plus, it's local to the area where we grew up in, which we just love.
Use the link in the show notes below to get some Matt Hat Jerky for yourself, and make sure to use our coupon code SistersAssembled for 10% off. Hello and welcome to Sisters Assembled, your home for all things MCU. And I am excited to say that this is our first episode reacting to Daredevil Born Again. Today we are going to talk about episodes 1 and 2 because we got to see both of those premiere week this week. We're going to do a verbal spoiler warning this time. We always have them in the show notes as well, but I'm going to say it verbally too because I have to say those first 10 minutes, man, which we're going to talk about, they were wild. They were insane. And so you're not going to get a ton of warning. We are going to dive right into it immediately because there is a lot to talk about in these first 2 episodes of Magnificent Television. So leave and come back if you haven't seen the first 2 episodes. If you've seen the first 2 episodes, we're kicking it off right now. Katie, go.
Dude, let me just start by saying the tone of how it started, I thought they were going to show the snap.
I didn't pick that up, but I could see why you would.
Yeah, it just seemed so jolly. It seemed like we were all like, whatever. I thought it was going to show the snap. Not that because we know that this is not during the snap, obviously. But I thought that's where we were going with it, to kind of show some of Matt's story. And so I had a text typed out to you. Like, oh, I know where this is going already. The first minute into this. No, I did not.
And just for a little context, I had watched it the night before and had been texting her, like, no spoilers, but I was like, so the first 5 minutes are insanity, or like 10 minutes. I was like, get ready. Like, you're gonna, like, your mind is gonna be blown. I was like, some poop hit the fan real early. So that was what she like went in with. Very vague, but she knew it was going to hit early and it was going to hit fast or hard, and it did. And that was what that's interesting that was what you thought. I can totally see though why you would think like that was going to be the like mind-blowing moment and they went in a totally different direction, but wow.
And it only was because I'm thinking, what's a better way to kind of honestly bring this into the MCU than to start it off with the biggest thing that's happened in the MCU to this day.
Yeah.
So I was like, that could kind of make a lot of sense. And I think, again, really helped tell part of Matt's story on filling in. I mean, it's been 7 years since the last season of Daredevil. So filling in some of these gaps, filling in where we, left off. And instead, what the heck?
They murdered Foggy 10 minutes in.
So a part of me is not shocked narratively, but I didn't think it was going to happen. Listen, no part of me would have predicted this was going to happen. But narratively, I don't think I'm shocked because 2 things. When this show was first being done by Marvel, prior to reshoots and everything else, they were not even in it. Karen and Foggy did not exist in the show. They were moving away from their characters entirely.
Mm-hmm.
When they tested it and whatever, they decided to bring them back. No part of me knew, or I should say every part of me knew, they did not reshoot this entire show to fill them in. Did I think that meant that they were going to like kill Foggy off in 10 minutes or anything of that nature? No, but I definitely knew they were not going to be playing the same role, I think, that we would have been seeing because they didn't have time to reshoot an entire show like that. That's just not possible. They had it already shot. So I wasn't going to be shocked if we saw less of them. I didn't anticipate they were going to just be like, actually, we're going to bring them back, have them be like, they're the narrative plot device to kind of move him away from his vigilantism. I don't know if that's a word. Vigilantism?
Vigilantism. Identity as a vigilante.
Yeah, there you go. But obviously they had to have an impetus for that. And that was this moment. And I think it works so well because I also actually think the story they end up going forward with, like with the new characters and kind of, I don't want to say like Foggy and Karen 2.0, but kind of, it's working so far in the first 2 episodes. So I'm not entirely shocked that these characters were phased out a little bit. I just didn't think they were going to like cold blood murder Foggy off the show.
Yeah, I mean, look, like, I feel like coming into the show, I had been seeing interviews where they were talking about, there's a really big moment that is like an emotional driver for Matt at the beginning. And, going in with that lens, I didn't think it was going to happen 10 minutes in. I didn't know that Foggy was going to be murdered, but I will say, like, they're just the way, I think what you were picking up and thinking it was going to be the snap, I had a similar level of anxiety, but I didn't think it was going to be the snap. I just was like, something doesn't feel right. Like, you can tell the way it's shot. I don't know if it's the way it's shot or just the general like vibe and aura those first 10 minutes give. You can tell something isn't quite right or it's not going to be right and that something bad is going to happen.
Right.
And it just starts to ratchet up, ratchet up, ratchet up. And then it wasn't until, you saw Bullseye getting ready and you see Foggy and Karen on the street. And I was like, it's going to be one of them. Holy crap. He's going to shoot them. And I was like, but they're not going to kill them. Like, in my head, this is the narrative that's going. I'm like, he's not going to kill them. There's no way they're going to kill off Foggy or Karen. But then I remembered, I was like, he doesn't miss. And right now, Matt's not close enough to make him miss. And I was like, oh my God, like one of them is going to die. And when he hit Foggy, I was like, not Foggy. Like, Foggy.
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, but why Foggy? Although emotionally,
yes.
I think that's your bigger driver. Yeah, that's his best friend for years. I mean, I definitely think that made the most sense. Like, no hate towards Karen, but I definitely think very different relationship there.
Yeah, for sure. And he and Foggy just have so much of a deeper relationship, because of the history there. And I also just think Foggy's like was like the sweetest guy, and I was like, oh my God, not Foggy. And I just remember thinking, like, as he's like laying on the sidewalk, I was like, no, he's actually like, this is gonna be the moment they were talking about. This is the emotional driver. And so I wasn't surprised then when they had the year-long gap. I was like, no, this is what, we're going to now see how Matt has completely changed his life. I mean, the man moved out of Hell's Kitchen. You don't change Matt Murdock more than taking the man out of Hell's Kitchen. There's just, I mean, we can talk about, and we will obviously talk about how different Matt is, but I think we talked a lot in our predictions, and this is what I will say about how they've kind of set up this Born Again in comparison to seasons 1 through 3. We talked a lot about how do you pay homage to the first 3 seasons, and even the execs at Marvel were saying, we want you to be able to watch Born Again cold, but also know that it respects the first 3 if you're coming off the back of the first 3 or you've seen them. And I think killing off Foggy, as heartbreaking as it is, was the perfect way to do it because you're basically getting a new Matt. Like, his entire emotional foundation was just rocked to the core. Then Karen left him. She's in San Francisco now. So his whole support system is gone. He's a completely new guy, but yet he's still the same guy. And it was the perfect balance. I mean, truly, narratively, hats off to Marvel. Like, lately, we've been ragging on them a little bit, but this was masterfully done.
And I think plopping us right in to his life now, also, it was such a smart move because I didn't feel like we needed to relearn everybody. I just was like, this was his life. Same with how you start any show, right? Like, this is the side character you're getting. You may not have known this person before, but now you're learning them. But the main character knows them. They don't have to meet them. You don't have to be introduced to them. You'll get to know them. I believe it's Kirsten McDuffie.
I believe so, yes.
So if I accidentally say Kristen, it's just because I always do that with that name for some reason. But, that's his partner. He went into a partnership with her. Clearly, they're doing quite well for themselves. I mean, look, even Matt's got an upgrade. Like, he is doing, unfortunately, but fortunately, well for himself since this moment and since giving up being Daredevil. And so I do have to agree with it being so masterfully done because I think you need to bridge the gap.
Mhm.
You need to be able to have a show, and we talked about this in the predictions. You need to be able to have a show that can follow up 3 seasons already made, but made by an entirely different studio, has brought in an entire audience, but also make it your own and now be able to tell your own story with this character. And that's exactly what they did. And maybe it hasn't fully clicked yet, and we'll have to see how it like pans out in other episodes. But so far, the actions in the first 10 minutes and then having us know that Karen, during the cases when we learn, or the trials when we learn that Karen moved and everything else, having that knowledge and taking them off the board so far is not taking away, in my opinion, from this being Daredevil.
I agree.
And that's not to say I don't love Foggy, and that's not to say I don't have a like towards Karen. But I mean, they did a seamless job of, like I said, it's like a Foggy and Karen 2.0. We see he already has a new partner. They clearly knew each other from before. He's doing well in the legal side of it. He has a new love interest, which is Heather. We see she's already getting herself involved on accident in things, but much less like purposefully like Karen, and much more on accident, which we'll touch on. But we see that his life goes on. And if you're new to the world, you don't feel weird not knowing who the guy that died 10 minutes in is, or who the random blonde is. But if you're us, you're like, okay, that actually kind of worked.
Yeah.
Like I'm not feeling a void yet.
No, I mean, it was so like it struck that perfect balance, I think. Again, like you paid homage, but yet you very clearly set the boundary and said, this is a new show. This is a new Matt. This is for a new era. He is literally born again. And it lived up to the name really, really well. I will say one of the things that struck me, and you touched on this when you said he's not Daredevil anymore. We literally only got 10 minutes, 5 minutes in 2 episodes. And the first
Mhm.
episode was an hour long. In an hour and 45 minutes, we got 5 minutes of Daredevil, and I wasn't bored a bit. I was so into it, and I was so engrossed that when I finished the second episode, I was like, dang, he literally hasn't even been Daredevil other than the flashback where he watched his best friend get murdered. And you had me hooked the entire time. That is a feat.
So that's actually something I did want to point out, because when I was kind of discussing where the show has come from its inception of coming under the MCU kind of Marvel umbrella after it being at Netflix, this was, or the initial direction of it was to focus more on the legal side of it, to make it more of a, I don't want to make it equivalent to a Law and Order, but like kind of the second half of a Law and Order when you're watching the actual trial now. You're watching the other team, the prosecution, sit there and try and put the bad guy behind bars or whatever they have to do. Very similar in feel, in my opinion, where we're seeing a lot more of the legal side of what Matt does. And I think that's just as important to counterbalance that. And listen, I could have watched that show when they were describing it regardless.
Yeah.
I think that stuff's so interesting to me. I could have watched that show. But I do think it's interesting to see what we kind of perceived to be changing when they were doing, those reshots and everything else, and what seemingly is staying. So far, that legal narrative is staying, and I'm intrigued because we know it's going to lead to something bigger, but I agree, I'm not bored. You're seeing the pieces on the board. I also do think, not to go off into this area, but I think we have to, you have 2 protagonists.
Yeah.
This season.
Yes, you do.
You're not just telling the story of Matt Murdock, you're entirely following, with the exact same amount of screen time, Kingpin.
Yep.
Wilson Fisk. He is our other protagonist, and they are balancing the entire narrative between the 2 of them. And so I think being able to do that too, they're both in like this weird place. We're not watching vigilante Matt, we're watching lawyer Matt. And we're not watching the infamous Kingpin crime lord, we're watching Mayor Kingpin, Mayor Fisk, if you will. I think right now I can't even call him Kingpin because technically that's not who he is, supposedly. So it's very interesting because I think they are both, to your emphasis, born again into different versions of themselves just by what they're taking on in this new season. But because they're sharing that, I think it helps to also not get bored either. Just when, one thing is kind of getting weird on Matt's side, and by weird, I just mean like heating up, whatever, we're once again overseeing where Mayor Fisk is at and what he's doing and what's happening over there.
Yeah, you're so right. I mean, the two of them have always been at odds, right? It's really been their show. The most constant relationship, the most focused upon relationship in the whole show is theirs. And it's this odd balance that they've struck. I feel like balance is like my word of the episode, but it's not even to me like there are two protagonists. It's the protagonist and the antagonist, but they're given the same amount of airtime. Like often when you're telling a story, you're getting it mainly from the protagonist point of view, and it's like a 75-25 split. And they were like, no, 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 no. We know what we've got in our Wilson Fisk. We know that he is a fan favorite character. We know that this actor has nailed this for years, has done it both in the MCU previously and outside the MCU previously. We are going to make our airtime reflect the level of importance that we give both of these characters because we have evolved. I mean, Fisk is in the first season, he's in the second season, he's in the third season. How often do you have the same villain in 3 consecutive seasons of television, now in a fourth, and he's not boring? It's because he continues to evolve and change the same way that Matt continues to evolve and change, and they're doing it both together in parallel, apart, like, but you always know they're on a collision course. And I love that they're giving them the same amount of airtime this year or this season, because I think they're acknowledging these are two incredibly well developed, well written, well acted, strong characters, and we're not going to pick one over the other because at the end of the day, this collision is going to be just as explosive in season 4 as it was in season 1, but it's coming from a completely different perspective because they're coming from different places than they ever have before. That relationship between the two of them is just so central to what makes this show work, and it's so good. It's just, that's all I'm going to say. It's amazing.
It is so central. And I think that's almost why you also don't feel the absence so far. Again, we've seen 2 episodes, but I also think that's why you don't see the absence of Karen or Foggy so far, because we're focusing on these 2 characters that are so connected and also so similar while doing things so differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's so interesting about them is they have the same concept. It's like the concept of a plan, right? Like they have the concept of a plan together, but it's not executing it the same way. And so I think it's really interesting that because this relationship is actually the strongest thing I think that's come out of all 3 seasons in the long run. I mean, I think it's the strongest relationship that even out of the first season came out of, but now it was continued, as you pointed out, in the next 2 seasons. Again, you feel less of a hole with changing side characters when you're being driven with these 2 main characters.
Yeah, 100%. And I think too, it's very interesting the way that both of them have changed this season in particular. Because if you think about that diner scene, which, side note, maybe we'll talk about this, maybe we won't. I feel like everything that we saw in the trailers, we saw in the first 2 episodes. Like, I don't, other than the fight scenes where he's in the mask, because obviously we talked about he's not been in the mask other than the flashback scene. Other than those scenes, every bit of footage I'm pretty sure we've seen already. So, other than, and also Frank's appearance. So, this whole show, like, I have no concept of what's going to happen anymore because I feel like all my predictions were wrong and, like, proven wrong in the first 2 episodes, which is actually kind of surprising and great. But the thing that is so interesting and is pointed out really subtly in the diner scene is Fisk is talking about how, oh, it's really hard to like calm your demons, isn't it? Right? Like it's so hard when you have this rage building inside you. And he's basically saying to Matt, like, you and I are the same. You don't want to acknowledge it, but we are the same. We just happen to maybe go about things a little bit differently. But then you look at the progression of these characters, and as we've reached season 4, season 1 of Born Again, whatever you want to call it, they've both chosen to the best of their ability remove that darker side of them. Kingpin has given up his empire. He's practically given up Vanessa, which is like mind boggling. Like that part I struggle with because the Wilson Fisk of seasons 1 through 3 making any decision that would hurt Vanessa in any way, emotionally or physically, there's a little bit of dissonance there for me, and we can talk about that.
Yeah.
But then you have Matt, who has completely given up his Daredevil, persona, and he is literally just living life as Matt Murdock. He's given up the devil, he's given up the rage, all of it. And they've both chosen to do that at a similar time. And they're sitting there at that table, both acknowledging with thinly veiled threats to the other one, you step out of line and you give in to your rage and your darker side, my darker side's going to come back. And that's like the mutually assured destruction nuclear option that they both laid out at that table. And it was so like paralleled so well. That whole conversation, I mean, what a masterclass in acting and writing and just character storytelling. Cause that could have gone really, I know they talk a lot about how, in the first 3 seasons, there's just a lot of two people talking in a room. Okay, fine. But if it's like those two guys talking in a room, I could probably watch an hour of that scene and you wouldn't bother me because there's just so much going on and what they're saying and what they're not saying and all of the history between the two of them. Exceptionally well done scene.
Yeah, it was. And I think you make a lot of good points on just their relationship and what that conversation really goes to say. I do want to get into Vanessa because I feel like you can't tell Kingpin's story really without going into all of that. So that was the one part for me that I think also stuck out as just strange.
Yeah.
And I think it all comes down to we've seen Wilson Fisk in what, 2 other properties, Hawkeye and Echo. He's been on his side quests. We've seen him in the MCU before. Obviously, she was not coming back initially either. Vanessa was not confirmed to come back. So I think fitting her back into the narrative while also having to explain, yeah, he's been shot in the eye and he's been out in like Oklahoma doing everything he was doing in Oklahoma and just like all this other thing, like just all the other narratives that he's been a part of, which I think as a whole work. But when you have to put them face to face with Vanessa's storyline, I think that was the one part that I think was a little bulky. It just didn't quite work. And then I think when he came back, like, and the first thing he kind of was saying was like it's much bigger than this. I want to do this. Obviously, didn't like come right out and be like, I'm gonna be the mayor. But he was like, I got the votes. Like, I this all has to go like on the DL now. I can't be tied to this. I think that was a little jarring.
Yeah.
I will admit. Especially, honestly, I think it was a little jarring even coming from Echo. And knowing where that ended, it just because we didn't know from that perspective that Vanessa's been out here running the entire criminal mastermind company.
Yeah.
So knowing that was still happening, I think, yes, there was like a small misstep there. Like you accidentally hit your toe on the curb and kind of stumbled, but you're like, you recovered. You didn't fall. We're good. No bruised knees. So I think we're good. But I will say that was a little strange. I think you kind of said about the dissonance between him doing everything he would for Vanessa and kind of that not seeming to align. I don't know if that part to me is true because as you can even see in the first 2 episodes from my perspective, he loves her.
Oh, for
he
sure.
wants to be with her. I think the irony is there an interesting dichotomy of each other as well? Because I think he turned her into a criminal mastermind.
Yeah, she's really good. She's really got
good
some
at
skills.
it.
Yeah.
She's really good at it, clearly. And she was also clearly enjoying it.
Yeah.
She pretty much says that in therapy. She was like, I have great relationships with everybody I've been working with, and like everybody loves me.
Well,
Like
she also was sleeping with one of them, so
yeah, there was that whole thing.
That also I think is why I struggled with their relationship in this episode or these 2 episodes, not because it was her, but because the idea of either one of them, having a relationship outside of the marriage when you see the first 3 seasons and they are so supportive and like so literally obsessed with each other. Not to say that, she clearly was going through a lot. Like I'm not blaming her in any way, but I do think that to me, because we haven't seen her since season 3 and we had no idea of kind of what she's been doing, it was really, really kind of shocking for me to hear then that she was interested in anyone outside of him, because the last time we saw them was the night of their wedding and he was being hauled away and like yeah, it was just like a lot. I don't know. It felt like very strange because we hadn't seen her since that moment.
Yeah, and again, I think unfortunately in this case, actually bringing her back, I don't think so far in the first 2 episodes is helping.
I agree.
I think she's going to probably in the future, like throughout the show and or the throughout this season and then the show as a whole, I think that's different when they kind of right the ship and they get them back where they need to be.
Because the thing too is like it would be really awkward if you have their whole relationship in 3 seasons and then all of a sudden she's just not around. Like
Right.
I understand why they felt like they had to bring her back. I just don't think, to your point, they haven't found their footing with their relationship yet.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is because when they're trying to tell the story of Wilson Fisk, quote unquote, becoming good, turning to the good side, and you are also having to show that, as Vanessa was spending time with Fisk and, marrying him and falling in love with him, she was just as much going to the dark side. She fell in love with the dark person that he is underneath everything, and the person and the nice person he is to her, of course, as well, but she loves all parts of him.
Mm-hmm.
Not picks and chooses. She's not like the mafia wife that was out there and was like turning the blind eye. She just wants the rich stuff. Like she knew what he was doing, and not that she was like all the seasons like hands in it, but like clearly she got there. And I think you did need to kind of fill some of that in. I just think it felt a little apart. Like they were like A goes to C and you were like, okay, I can make up with for the fact that there's no B. Like it's okay, it's close enough. It's not like we went from A to Q, like I can fill in holes. It's fine. So I do think that was kind of its own thing. I obviously know that relationship is going to play a pivotal role in who he is. Obviously, too, even as the mayor, having an essentially estranged wife is hurting him. And so I think image wise, that's not helping either. So I think there's a lot of layers on why they need to fix their relationship. They're obviously now seeing Matt's, I don't know, girlfriend, if they're officially quoting it that, which you can't make that up because of all the therapists in the world. They're like, yes, of course. So that in itself, I think, is going to be such an interesting plot as that comes to fruition somewhere further down the road.
Can you imagine what that double date would sound like? Going on a double date, one with your therapist, but then your therapist who's also dating your arch nemesis. I mean, wow, layers.
Yeah. Yeah. And just think about what people do or don't know at that table.
I know.
Like
and
about
poor
each
Heather
other.
is like, everybody is like in on it, but poor Heather,
Yeah.
who is just like 70 steps behind because these people have 10 years of, background with each other almost.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's a lot. I want to talk about next White Tiger because I was not expecting this to be the storyline, but I am pleasantly surprised.
Me too.
We talked about it in the predictions. I thought it was going to be one of those things where Matt was like, not into your style, bro. Like, I'm going to step back in. And for them to, have him be a client of Matt's and go about it that way, I think is fascinating. I think one of the other things I really loved because, Matt deals with a lot of self-hatred, right? We talk about that a lot in the first 3 seasons, or the show talks about that a lot in the first 3 seasons. And that moment where he is visiting Hector in jail and he confronts him about being White Tiger and he talks about all of that and the way he's talking about being a vigilante, and you know that he's not actually yelling at Hector, he's yelling at himself and his past self, is like the layers of the writing of this show. It's like they took all of the best writers of Marvel and they were like, actually, we're gonna give you the A+ squad, not just the A squad, because this is like stuff that they were not doing on any of the other shows. So hats off.
X-Men 97.
True. I'm sorry. Any of the other live action. I
Okay,
was
fair.
thinking specifically of live action. So that's a good qualifier.
I was gonna say, I was like, no, I think X-Men 97 has some of the best dialogue.
Yes. And like layered writing. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But I will say Daredevil Born Again, from a writing perspective, a style perspective, and a tone perspective, and a storytelling perspective, have all just blown everything else out of the water in the first 2. I mean, I can only judge by the first 2 episodes, but these first 2 episodes, in my opinion, have blown every other live action piece out of the water by about 1,000-fold. I don't know if it's because I prefer the tone of the Netflix stuff and it just feels better, but amazing. And that scene in the holding cell, well, not really holding cell, whatever, visiting cell with White Tiger at Rikers is one of the, great examples of just the multi-level, multi-layered writing that they were doing in this show. This show's playing chess. All of the other shows were playing checkers.
So I want to go off two things. First, I want to just say about the White Tiger thing. I also did not anticipate this being the direction it went. But again, I think that's leaning into showing more of Matt's legal skills than showing him as a vigilante. That's not to say we're not obviously getting Daredevil later on. We know we are. We've seen plenty of fight scenes in trailers that we haven't seen yet. We know he's coming back. But I think I actually, as somebody who more recently have watched the Daredevil Netflix series, I'm appreciating seeing his skills as a lawyer.
Yeah.
Because I actually think there were, and some of it was to tell his story as a character, but I think there were times during the Netflix show that I found myself annoyed with him as a character because he was too wrapped up in the Daredevil side of it. And I found myself extremely sympathetic with Foggy's point of view, where he'd be like, dude, like, you have a job, you have real responsibilities. You can't just
have
like,
a law degree. Use it.
well, not even that. Like, he brings poor Foggy into this partnership when Foggy had a job lined up, and Foggy was like, yeah, let's do this. And then he's like, actually, let me not have any responsibility. Poor Karen was out here doing more than anything half the time because Matt was MIA at all times. So there were genuine times that I was like, dude, Matt, like, I kind of need you to focus. Like, your day job is right there, and I kind of need you to do it. So I do appreciate, because I seem to be leaning into the legal side of him and his skills. I mean, we've seen it. I think, you know what it was? The worst part was the Punisher trial, because he made them take the case, and then he was like, haha, Elektra. And so that's what it was.
So distracted. He's literally that meme where he's holding the one girl's hand, but he's watching the other girl go by.
No,
His day job is
literally.
the first girl, and Elektra and Daredevil are the second
literally.
one.
I was like, dude, and it was so annoying because I was like, you need to stop. Like,
Yeah,
you put your
focus.
friends in this position, and now you're like MIA. Either way, I think it's going to be interesting because they're going to follow that through line. So it's going to be a strange way of showing the story, but I'm intrigued to see more. I'm also intrigued to see if we're going to actually see more of White Tiger, though, because we only really saw I think it was like the video of him doing whatever. He clearly has some like magical amulet and all this stuff. I would hope we do see more of him, but I think it's interesting that, he is in jail. He is not just in jail for like, ha ha ha. No, he's in jail for killing a cop, although it accidentally, it happened. So I do think that's going to be an interesting side plot that I'm not sure how it's going to pan out, but I'm ready to see it. But I want to also talk about the writing, because you brought up some great points. And I think when you said that it's playing chess, the show is not just playing chess with and in comparison to other Marvel shows, it is playing chess with its watchers.
Yeah.
And if you are picking up what I'm putting down, there's a lot of things that it is tying to current affairs.
Oh, yes. The metaphors were strong.
Oh, I found myself sitting there and I was like, am I getting flashbacks? So I do have to say, I think that is such an interesting way, because I think this is the type of show that can do it.
Yeah.
And can do it in an interesting way as well. And I think, obviously, Wilson Fisk is a little different of a criminal than some other current people, but he was a criminal. I mean, all of New York hated him, and he got elected into mayoral office. Like, he won. He did it.
And I think the thing that when I started really picking up the parallels, it was just the way that people were seeing him as this dark horse, this anti-establishment, not career politician. I mean, I was getting like 2015 flashbacks, 2016 flashbacks. I was like, oh my goodness, like, wow. But at the same time, I was like really impressed that they were going there.
Yeah.
And then you hit election night and you see the jubilation on the streets, and you're like, this is a parallel to how some people felt at different points in American history. And I think that, to me, I was like, this completes it, right? This completes the parallel that they are drawing with Wilson Fisk and certain other, let's say, real life examples.
Well, and I think they also have two very interesting moments where, one, you have the police force who actively will not back their new mayor.
Yeah.
And it took Fisk getting a little dirty with some blackmail, even if he was never planning to act or whatever, to essentially threaten the chief of police, not only from resigning, but to back him. Didn't grant him any of his wishes because he was like, "You thought you were going to mess with me."
I have the leverage now.
Yeah, but I think that was an interesting way to kind of be like, not everybody supports this man.
Yeah.
And so I think, and even people who he's going to preside over do not support him. So I think that was an interesting parallel. I also think to real life events, the parallel of the Punisher and everything that came down to. For those of you who aren't aware, like they changed the Punisher symbol because Marvel was not, I don't want to say not happy, but it was being used by people who were using it to do poor things and who believed in things that were not great. Let's say that way. And so Marvel actually redesigned the Punisher symbol to not be the exact same skull that it had been because it was getting repurposed, unfortunately. When we saw the police officer that was trying to actively, well, first off, he was coming to kill the guy they are already attacking. That whole plot line is going to be very interesting because they're dirty cops, but like not in Kingpin's dirty cops kind of way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm excited to explore that, but not only come to literally kill the only witness, but then like attack Matt. And a part of me was kind of mad. I mean, obviously they were going to try to kill Matt, but I was kind of mad that Matt like went so ham on them because I was like, dude, you really could have just like really did the self-defense here because now they
Literally.
attacked the guy's lawyer.
Yeah.
But when we see him have the Punisher symbol and that kind of relationship with it, I think is so funny. And I don't mean funny in like I haha laugh, but like it's such a true representation. And also we in this universe, we know Frank Castle.
Yeah.
We know what that man stands for, which is that is the part that's kind of laughable because now that they're making that connection in the universe for this show, it is funny because they actually do have a Frank Castle and we're like, Frank would hate you. Frank would have killed you.
Yeah, literally, you are the exact opposite of what Frank Castle believes in his value system.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I just think that the way that they are tying it to modern events is actually like kind of surprising. Like I
Yeah.
don't think I expected them to really go that way, but the way that they framed the whole, Fisk candidacy, the winning, even, the way he's kind of been, the way that people have reacted to him in office, just he's kind of like this celebrity, and like all of that is so reminiscent to some of the things that we have had as lived experiences recently in the United States. And so I appreciate that you've been able to do this and like you chose to go there, because I think it just grounds the show in a level of reality that none of the other Marvel shows do, or even some of the movies, I think. And obviously, like a superhero's escapism and you're suspending belief, and like that is all well and good. But I love that this show feels so removed from everything else. And yet you get the references to Spider-Man, and yet you get all of the larger, it's firmly in the MCU. That was established. Like they made that very clear even in 2 episodes, yet it just tonally feels so different from everything they've done up until this point. Even Echo. And I compare it to Echo because they have the same kind of like grittiness to them, and that was the first time that Marvel Studios has really gone that gritty route. And yet this still feels very different from that, and that's not a bad thing, but I just think this show stands so on its own when you compare it to everything that Marvel's done to date, and I mean everything.
I agree. I do think some of it is because, and this goes to just grounded heroes in general, I think you can open the door a lot more to tell some of these darker and not even darker, but just more advanced themes.
Mm-hmm.
I would never expect you to be able to try and don't even try, let alone do it, fit this kind of storyline in with the Scarlet Witch.
Yeah.
Like, what is Wanda gonna do? She will just rewrite reality. Like, it doesn't work. She's also not, I mean, 9 times out of 10, she's not wandering down the street like crime. Like, it doesn't, that's just not really her MO. That's just not who she is. So I think, and especially because I feel like there's been so much of us living in the mystical, living in the bigger, space and all this stuff. Not to say we haven't had grounded things, but even when you have heroes like Moon Knight who might be on the ground fighting, I mean, that guy's fighting his inner demons too. Like
Well, so is Matt.
Yeah, but like Matt doesn't have a whole other personality living within him. That's what I meant.
2.
Well, now, but yes. So that I was literally meaning his quite literal other inner demon.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
But there's a lot of that. And even with the Egyptian lore, like
Yeah.
there's a lot more going on. Like eventually two gods are fighting in the sky. I still remember being like, what is going on? I don't know.
I forgot that happened.
Yeah, Khonshu out there. But regardless, I feel like in general, we have a lot of these stories where it fits to be able to tell this and tell it well. I think there are obviously things from like the Falcon and Winter Soldier. But even
Yes.
then, I think some of that, and I think it was done well, but I think some of it still had to fit so deeply into the MCU. You were
Mhm.
bringing in the Winter Soldier, you were bringing in Sam Wilson as Falcon, now as Captain America. You had a lot you had to do. Plus, they were setting groundwork from right after the blip.
Yeah.
They had to tell a bigger story than just some of the themes on Sam becoming Captain America. But that's a good example. That is a show that has been able to touch on these bigger themes. And so I think this is a show that's had the ability, and I think especially with some of the nature of it, it makes it so easy to do it. I mean, it's not a stretch to do what you had to do with Wilson Fisk to make him mayor. It's not a stretch to have the cop sit here and have a Punisher tattoo. Like, you didn't need to really rewrite the whole story to fit this theme into it.
No, it does just fit so naturally. And I think you touched on part of the reason why it works so well. And look, I love the MCU. That's why I'm here. But I will say it is refreshing to watch something that comfortably sits in the MCU. Because I will say, I don't feel much, if any, friction of them being in there now.
No.
It feels like it fits, like they've always been there, right? But at the same time, it's so nice to watch something that doesn't have the weight of the entire MCU, all 30 something films, all 10 to 15 shows.
Yeah.
It fits, it has its place, but it's not out there weighed down by all of the lore. It's just a well written story with strong characters and actors who really get their characters.
Yeah.
And I think as much as I love stuff that is steeped in it and is in there, sometimes it can be a little cumbersome, and it's just kind of refreshing to be like, you know what, this is just a story for story's sakes, and I'm sure these characters are going to go on to do big things. I mean, Mayor Fisk is going to maybe be in Spider-Man. Like, Spider-Man was mentioned in relation to the whole vigilante bill.
Yep.
That's not a coincidence. Let's just put a little pin in that one for the future. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like the purpose of this show is to set up 6 other properties or to close the loop on 6 other properties. It's just a good story.
Well, and that's where, even going back to how we started this episode, the bridge of not just bringing it into the MCU, but bringing it in and knowing you had to balance where Daredevil has already appeared and where Kingpin has already appeared.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's been an issue. Like I said, the only blip for me was kind of having to tell Vanessa's story in there.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I think they pretty seamlessly have been able to be like, we know you've seen this character. We know you've seen this character. Let's bring them home and let's keep telling their story and marry, again, MCU and Netflix and bring it back together. I want to talk about one more thing, and it's what is still rumored to be the biggest villain, per se, of this season, which is Muse, because we seemingly have gotten the appearance of that character, which is actually played by the guy from Wednesday, and I really like him. And he always plays like a little bit of a weird character, so I really enjoy him. But I think he's going by the name of Bastion, which was kind of triggering, if I'm being honest.
Wait, stop. Don't, like, I couldn't understand why my fight or flight just went. And
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
like, oh my God.
Yep. No, I actually had to like look up his name because I was like, I remembered everybody talking about Muse when like they were talking about the rumor of him being in this and everything else. But as soon as I saw him appear, like the actor whose name is currently escaping me, as soon as I saw him appear, I was like, oh, it's him, because you don't bring in like an actual actor that people are going to recognize to play like a random kid at the book signing. Like, it's going to be somebody important. But then I was like, I don't know. Did he even say his name? So I think when I looked it up, his name, they were calling him Bastion, but not spelled Bastion. Or wait, how did the other Bastion spell it? It was spelled the opposite. Let's just say it that way.
Okay, interesting. I'm not going to lie. I actually was not aware of the Muse rumors, But I will say my spidey senses were going off at the book signing because he was definitely giving some odd vibes. And so I was like, this guy, again, just making my spidey senses tinkle. So now I understand why that was. Interesting. I will definitely be looking up this Muse character between now and the next episode because I do think if you're right and that is who he's playing, I could totally see that being an interesting reason to get Heather a little more involved in more of Matt's life because she's getting the very sanitized version of Matt Murdock right now, and there's a very unsanitized version coming. We all know he's going to put the suit back on. Super interesting. He's now dating a therapist, so, lots of layers there.
Well, I just have to really quick say, I thought his friend was setting him up to go to therapy,
I
not
did
as a
too.
date. Like, I was like, dang, she made him go to therapy. And then I was like, oh, no, they're going to date. Okay, interesting. But back to the Muse thing. Yeah, don't quote me on his name being Bastion. I had to look at the IMDb for that. And that's what they were calling him because they aren't obviously going to officially call him Muse yet because they don't want that to drop. But pretty much for reference, Screen Rant is calling him a psychopathic serial killer. So keep that in mind as we move forward. I also finally looked up the guy's name because I felt bad calling him the guy from Wednesday. And it's Hunter Doohan. He was, like I said, I know him from Wednesday, but he played kind of a little off the rail character there too. So not far for him to go, in my opinion. But yeah, you could definitely tell he was like strange. And because I recognized him, I was like, oh, nice. Like I knew where that was going.
Well
immediately.
casted.
Yeah, I was like, this is going to be good. But yeah, it's going to be a very interesting way. I'm excited to see how that pans out. Obviously, we haven't seen him actually go to therapy yet. We haven't seen him. I mean, like, let's be real. That's not going to work for him.
No.
We haven't seen him be Muse yet. So he clearly has to still fall into the psychopathic serial killer kind of category. So therapy is not going to work, but he will be the reason that Matt probably suits back up. I'm excited to see it happen. I think he's a very interesting character, and we can break down his character at a different time as we get a little bit more into the story. But definitely just keep your eye out for him because if you didn't pick up, I mean, like you said, you picked up that his vibe was weird. But if you weren't picking up that, like, that's very likely who he's going to end up playing in the story he's going with, that's where this is likely going. So just keep an eye out. Maybe do some research on Muse to get ready because this guy's probably going to unravel pretty fast. So be ready for that. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I could see Matt suiting up to stop him now that White Tiger's in jail. I could see Matt helping or asking for help from Frank Castle because he's a guy who, this Muse guy could be someone who, I mean, if he's totally unhinged and completely, in a psychopathic, I don't know if you would call that. It's not a phase, but like truly like dealing with a psychotic break, I guess is the best way to say it. Like there's no reasoning, there's no lines, there's no morality whatsoever, and that's someone like you in Matt's mind he will probably have to kill him. Like that's how he's gonna view that situation, just knowing who Matt Murdock is and having seen him over the past few seasons. If he doesn't want to do that, he might have Frank on speed dial, but like obviously like not that way. But like you know what I'm saying?
Well, and having a psychopathic serial killer is also not good for a new mayor.
Correct. Yeah. So maybe we're going to see those guys team up because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Last thing I want to talk about, and we can talk about it quickly because it's nothing other than to say the use of music. I do not remember this from the first 3 seasons of Daredevil to this extent, it hitting me. But the way that they used music in the final scene of episode 1, where Matt is walking through kind of the sidewalk party, after, for lack of better term, after Fisk is announced as the winner, juxtaposed to Fisk on the rooftop looking down at the throngs of people excited about his win. That song, and then I think it also bled into the credits. Wow. I mean, that was well chosen. Great choice. And then for them to use, I think it's Get Free by the Vines at the end of episode 2 after Matt has screamed in rage because he has become violent again for the first time in probably a year. He's held it in, and these cops attacking him brought it out, and now he knows that scream was a scream of defeat because he knows the rage can't be bottled now. He knows, oop, a little leaked out, and now there's a chink in his armor holding Matt Murdock together and Daredevil inside. And so then for them to go immediately to get free, I was like, all right, whoever's handling music for Daredevil Born Again season 1, you nailed it. You nailed it.
It has to be the same person who did Agatha all along.
Yes. Yes.
And I was trying to think, I was like, Loki did it at the beginning during the credits.
Yes. Demons by Haley Kiyoko hit so hard. Season 1. Yes.
But that's why I was like, it's not Loki I'm thinking about though, because it was at the end. And it's Agatha all along is what I'm thinking of.
You Should See Me in a Crown. Oh! To this
That
day.
is still iconic to this moment. I don't care. I don't care. Yeah, I will say, especially the second, well, and maybe it was because I like also was jamming then to the song, but like the second episode, I was like, oh, that was really well done. So I didn't notice it as much in the first one, but I did notice the scene itself, and I was admiring the shots of just like the two of them.
Yeah, well, it's a softer song. It's TV on the radio and it's a little mellower, but I thought it hit the tone of episode 1 so nicely because you had Foggy's loss and you have Matt now just getting kicked while he's down, right? He carries around the memorial card of his best friend everywhere he goes, like, but he literally walks around with Foggy's memorial card in his jacket. Now his arch nemesis was just named Mayor. He's watching people celebrate and they're playing this song and it's just like, dang, like the mood is somber, and it did, but it like wasn't like a downer song at the same time, like it's just mellower, and I thought it was like really well done, and it hit me. I don't know, like emotionally I was like, I felt that. And then they did the other one like first episode 2, which was a completely different vibe, but it also fit that really well, and I was like, alrighty, music, we love this. I don't remember this from the first 3 seasons. Not to this extent.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't notice the first episode as much, but again, I noticed the shots themselves because I thought they were very well done.
Yes, for sure. All right. Well, I have to say, if you didn't get it by now, we resoundingly love Daredevil Born Again. 2 episodes in, and they are rocking and rolling, literally and figuratively. Great job. Hopefully, they're able to sustain this level of storytelling through the rest of the season. But I have to say, and I think I speak for both of us, this was a great start, and I'm super excited to see where we go from here. Please make sure that you are following on your podcast platform of choice, where you can catch the rest of our episodes reacting to the remaining episodes of Daredevil Born Again all throughout the rest of the run this spring. You can check out the website where we have things like our calendar and just general podcast info. And last but not least, down below, you'll find the link to our Buy Me a Coffee. If you are enjoying the show and you'd like to help support us, that would be a great place to do it.
You can also follow us on all of our socials down in the show notes as well. And as T just said, we will be covering Daredevil for the next, 7 weeks. So join us again next week as we are reacting to episode 3 of Daredevil Born Again. So far, so good. We're loving it. We hope you guys are too. And Marvel just blew your mind, so let's talk about it.